another episode of Sage Cigarettes Presents A Ghost in the Magazine. It's the last episode of our Black History Month series. I'm Steph,
And I'm Gabe.
and this week's movie was Get Out. So, we're going to go over the plot because this movie's fucking crazy. So, we're just going to dive into it.
So the movie starts off Lakeith Stanfield. So we see him. He's walking through a neighborhood at night. Looks like a nice neighborhood. He's on the phone with someone. From what he's saying, it sounds like it's like his girlfriend or something. And he's like, "Oh, you got me this suburbs or whatever." So anyway, he's walking by himself and he has no idea where he is because he's looking at the street names and like saying them to himself. He's telling himself the directions how to get back home. And you see a car pass by him, and then it turns around and slowly starts to pull up beside him, and he's trying to mind his own business, and then he's like, I'm just gonna turn around. So he turns around real quick and starts walking in the opposite direction, and then when he turns around to look at the car, the door is open but there's no one there, and then next thing you know, he gets hit by a guy. He's wearing like a knight's helmet.
So, the helmet is a Knights Templar helmet. So I thought this was really interesting and I didn't know before. So it's a Knights Templar helmet, which is like a little piece of the backstory that Jordan Peele created for these people. He calls it the Red Alchemist Society, and it's a secret group that comes together to do this thing that we're going to talk about later.
So he gets taken by this guy. Also, the music that the guy's playing in his car, it's some old timey music. But anyway, so after that, we see our main character. His name is Chris Washington. And
The opening scene is before that, and it shows all of his photographs of Black people in urban settings, and also Redbone by Childish Gambino is playing, which is very relevant and valid because that song he's like singing to his light-skinned girlfriend and telling her to stay woke because that's the only reason that their relationship is going to work.
right. Okay. So he's taking a shower and getting ready, and then he gets a knock at the door, and it's his girlfriend. And his girlfriend, her name is Rose, and she's a white girl. So they're an interracial couple, and they're talking about going to her parents' house for the weekend. And he's nervous because he's like, do they know? He doesn't say do they know I'm black, but he just says, do they know? But she knows what he's talking about. She's like, no, and it doesn't matter, which it doesn't. But
It shouldn't.
it shouldn't. You're right. It shouldn't matter. But when you're a person of color and you're dating someone who isn't, if you're dating a white person, that's a thought that you just have. Are their parents going to be okay with me because of the color of my skin? Which is terrible. It's just the reality of the world. Anyway, they're going on the trip, so they're driving.
So one thing that she does when they're driving that really pisses me off, and this is like the start, this is a recurring theme, she takes his cigarettes and throws them out the window.
He was very cool about it, but he probably knows himself that he should stop smoking, so that's probably why he was like a little passive
Sure.
about it.
But it's his right to do so, and I just think it's very rude to do something like that to your partner who you care about.
So they're playing around or whatever. They hit a deer. The deer jumps across and they clip it. So they stop the car. You see that the right side of the car has blood on it and the mirror on the side is broken. So they didn't hit it full on, just the side of it. So he gets out of the car and you can hear it too. You can hear the deer in pain.
It's awful.
That sound is terrible, but he's looking for it and he's like just slowly walking towards it, and he sees it on the ground like suffering, and he's frozen. He's just staring at it, and then boom, next scene.
They're talking to a cop. He pulls up. Rose is trying to explain the situation away, and then the cop's like, yeah, sure. And looks at our person and goes, well, let me see your ID. And
Right,
she's
she's
like,
super defensive.
yes, she is. And you think that that's a very supportive thing for her to do. Don't come at my Black boyfriend.
Yeah,
He
he
didn't
wasn't
do
happy.
anything. But he doesn't want any issues. He gives his state ID.
Right, and then the officer leaves. They're back on the road, and they get to her parents' house, and it's this big, beautiful house. It's secluded. There's not much around there.
They pass by Walter, and I'm pretty sure Georgina at some point. These are the house servants, and they're Black. And the dad makes sure to address it immediately. Like, I know what you're thinking, white family, Black servants. And he's very like, no. We're going to address it because it's an awkward thing.
So then they're talking to her parents, and I wrote this down. She was telling them how they hit a deer. How was the drive? And I was like, oh, it's fine. We hit a deer, though. And she said, it fruck us out.
Yeah, says Struck.
It just sounds weird. Fruck.
I don't even think that's real.
I don't know. I don't think that's a word. Anyway, Chris is talking to her dad, and he's showing him around the house and showing all the collector's items that he has and the memorabilia from his family or whatever. And he has some pictures of his grandfather, and he's talking about how his grandfather used to race people and that he was really fast, but that he ended up losing this big race and he lost it to a black man. That's very important. So as they're walking outside, he's asking them about Walter and Georgina, the two black servants in the house. And he's like, I know how it looks, but they used to help my parents out, and I just couldn't bear to let them go.
Wah wah.
He feels like they're quote unquote family in a way.
Wah wah. So they have dinner together, and Chris has like a nervous tick when he hasn't had a cigarette, which I think is common with smokers. And then it goes again. The dad is telling him it's a really nasty habit, like he has any right to say anything about it. And then goes, "You should let my wife hypnotize you."
And they're telling him about it. He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, I used to be a smoker too. And then she hypnotized me, and now I get sick when I think of a cigarette.
And honestly, who gives a fuck, sir? I want
Yeah.
to smoke my fucking cigarettes. They're so big and weird on the cigarettes. It's crazy invasive. Like, he just met you guys. That's
Right.
really fucking weird.
And Rose is also getting annoyed that they're doing too much. So, and they're having dinner, and her brother,
Who's a huge weirdo.
his name is Jeremy, and he's drunk. You can tell he's just wasted, and his movements, he's not still. He's like loopy, and he's telling embarrassing stories about his sister. He actually like asking me sports, and he's like, nah, like, and then he's like, oh, do you like MMA? And the parents are like, stop, because they know where it's going.
This kid's like, let's wrestle.
Let's fight, and Chris is like,
No thanks.
nah, dude. And he gets up and he's like, nah, come on, man. And is about to grab him.
At the dinner table.
Her mom says, like, Jeremy, stop. As soon as she said it,
Yeah,
he like stopped, like immediately.
It was very assertive and uncomfortable.
It was crazy. Then dinner's over. They go up to bed. They're gonna go to sleep. And
Chris
then
goes out for a cigarette.
so he's walking outside, walking to the house, and when he goes outside, he sees Walter.
Walter. Being
So
super weird.
He works outside mostly, but you just see him running full speed.
Yes.
Straight at Chris. And
For
Chris
no
just,
reason.
Yeah, and he has this face of anger. Chris is just standing there. He's like starts backing up slowly, but then he turns at the last second.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that little scene in the trailer, and it just made me so uncomfortable. I'm like, what's happening? I need to see this movie. I don't understand.
And then he runs into Georgina too.
It was one of those scenes where he sees her inside, because there were a couple where he sees her through windows and stuff. Like, she has no idea anyone else is there, and she looks really lost. But then he goes inside, and the mom's just fucking chilling like a creep. And she's like, do you smoke in front of my daughter? Like a psycho. And she's like, that's my kid. Like, him smoking around her is going to murder her. What?
And even then, Chris is still kind of cool about it. And then they start talking, and she's starting to do the hypnosis on him, right? But
Right, under the guise of just having a regular ass conversation, which is very rapey.
He realizes at a certain point, by that time, it's too late.
Been doing this for so long, I'm sure she can just fucking slip in there without you knowing and just wreck you. It bothers me. She starts probing about his life and the death of his mother, like it's any of her business. You just met this man. All of these things are huge red flags, and she's taking him back to a place where he has no business being.
He looks very uncomfortable, and
Sure.
he looks like he's physically in pain, and he starts shedding tears because it's traumatic. And then he's like, oh yeah, I see that place or whatever. And he's back in that room watching TV the night his mom died. And then she tells him, okay, sink through the floor.
And he's like, no. And she
Yeah.
just says, sink. And he sinks down into like this deep place in his body where he's not in control, and he can only see what's happening from really far away,
It's like
out of his own eyes.
A void. If you're in this very dark room, right, where you're like floating and you see a TV, but the TV, that's your life. You're watching your life. And she gets closer to him, and when you see his actual body, he's just sitting there with eyes wide open and his mouth open, and he's just crying. And she says, now you're in the sunken place.
It's so scary. It's so scary. You know, that's always been like a weird fear of mine, because if you've heard any episodes of this podcast, you know I'm scared of The Exorcist. In the second or third movie, they hypnotize Reagan, in and take her back to the time when she was possessed. And it makes me so very uncomfortable.
No, it's pretty scary. I couldn't imagine being in a situation like that. You're not able to do anything. Just
Mm.
watch.
It makes me feel helpless just watching the fucking movie.
So then she closes his eyes, and then he wakes up in the morning as if it was just a nightmare.
And his phone is unplugged. So basically, what happens from this point forward is that Rose, quote unquote, forgets that this is the annual big meeting for weird old people that are friends with her parents. Weird old white people. You know, she didn't forget. You never, ever make plans for your parents to meet your significant other for the first time when there's a big event. It's already uncomfortable. Meanwhile, he's the only Black person, and it's all these weird people who are
Yeah, they're
looking at
like
him like he's a slab of meat.
right, and they're wealthy. Like they all come in these nice cars. They're dressed nicely, and the way they're greeting Georgina and Walter, it's just everything seems kind of off.
They're very interested
Right,
in him and like his physical features and asking weird questions like, oh, is it true that it's better with a Black man? Oh,
right.
it's
Like
awful.
asking him, "Do you play golf at all?" Asking him, "Does he feel like he has any advantages of being a black man over like being anything else?"
Yeah. Oh, it's just the worst.
So at the party, he's just walking around looking, and he notices Keith's character. His name is Andre. So he sees him, and he's like I'm so happy to see another brother here, like another black dude. And Andre's talking. He's talking like
Like an
very
uptight old white man.
right, exactly. So he is like, okay, whatever, this is weird. And then he calls his friend and he tells his friend, like, this guy's really weird. I feel like I know who he is. He looks so familiar. Maybe you can help me out.
Before he goes upstairs to call his friend, there's this very unsettling moment. He walks up the stairs, and in the room where the stairs are located, there were a bunch of partygoers just chattering along. And when he goes upstairs, all of the talking stops, and all of the old white people look up towards the ceiling in unison. And it's awful. So he's talking to his friend.
Telling him all the weird stuff that's going on during his time at this house. And, Rod's telling him, oh, yeah, be careful because that sounds really sketchy. And he's talking about white people turning black people into sex slaves.
Yeah, he's very adamant about it. But you know what? His friend is the only one who makes any sense in this whole fucking movie.
Rod's a true friend, too.
Right.
So then Rose is talking to him and he's telling her the phone was unplugged again. He just thinks it's really weird, but she's like, you're just being paranoid, calm down.
She's gaslighting him.
Right. But Rod told Chris he should go take a picture of the guy. And then he runs into Georgina, and Georgina's apologizes.
Oh, but it's so strange. It's not
really
like a
strange.
normal apology. Her smile is tight, and she's like, I simply did this and that, and I left your phone. Like, she's talking just like that. And he's like,
Yeah.
please get away. Stop talking
She
to
called
me.
it a cellular phone. She said, your
She
cellular
sure
phone.
did.
And she's like, I didn't want to
Disturb
mess with
it further.
Right. And while they're talking, I forgot what he tells her, but she's like, "Oh no."
Like
She keeps
getting
saying,
you in trouble with white people. And she's like, no. And it's real scary. I would have pushed her down and ran out of the house.
and she sheds like one tear.
It's
Like
so weird.
it's so weird. Chris goes outside and
But he's an idiot and his flash is on.
yep. So when he takes the picture, you can see Andre's face go from like smiling to just like super serious and like kind of confused
And scared. His eyes are like wide open. I think
Yeah.
his nose is bleeding.
Yep, his nose starts to bleed, and then he's running up to Chris, and he's like, telling him to get out while you still can. You have to get out. And then everyone's just grabbing him and pulls him away. So then they're all sitting in the house, and they're saying, "Oh, he just had a seizure, whatever." And when he comes out, he's like, quote unquote, himself again, and he apologizes to Chris, and he goes to give him a fist bump, and Andre shakes his hand instead.
So at this point, Chris is like, fuck all of this. This is a lot.
He's gonna go take a walk, and he's talking to Rose and saying like he doesn't feel comfortable here, and she's trying to convince him to stay, and she's comforting him. But back at the house, they talk about they're gonna play bingo, but you see that everyone's quiet, and the father's up on a podium,
And he has
looking around
Chris's
too.
picture.
Yeah, and as the camera pans out, you see the picture of Chris, and what you find out is just a silent auction.
It's literally the slave trade brought up to the modern world. They're
So-
auctioning off his body.
So they're holding up bingo cards, whatever, and then eventually this one guy ends up winning the auction. Okay?
And it was a guy that Chris had had a conversation with. He was a blind art dealer, and he actually was familiar with Chris's work as a photographer.
Yeah, so Chris was actually amazed that this guy liked his art or whatever. So he's like, oh, this is really awesome.
Yeah, he liked more than just his art.
So they never gonna leave the house. And Rod finally calls him back and is like, "Hey man, I know who that is. That's Andre. He went missing a few months ago. Like we know him because he used to date so and so's sister or whatever." And he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh
Tracy
yeah,
with the Honda.
yeah. And then his phone dies. So after that call, he notices like a little door open in the room.
A creepy door.
So he opens it. He sees like a red box in there. He opens it up, and it's a bunch of pictures of Rose. And as he's looking through these pictures, he notices that
It's all her past black boyfriends, and she said he was the first.
Right. But then as he goes through them even further, he sees there's a picture of her and Walter. So he's like, "Oh fuck, this isn't right."
And then right after, there's one with her and Georgina.
So then he puts it away and he's like super nervous and freaked out. And Rose comes up. I think she noticed that he was in the closet.
Yes, she did, because she was standing on the other side, like, let's go. He's like, all right, well, she has to find the keys. And she's like, they're in here somewhere. And she puts the bag down, like, just find the keys.
He knows, like, I want to get out of here. But then the family's downstairs. Jeremy's blocking the door.
It's so ominous. Like, he's got a fucking lacrosse stick.
Yeah, and they're all talking. And he's like, where are you going? He's like, oh, we're going to get going. And they just keep,
like closing in on him. And then Jeremy swings the lacrosse stick at him, and he ducks, and he's like, fuck, I'm not in an okay situation. And that's finally when he loses his cool, because through all of the weird shit, he's been very cool. And I really love that about his character, because he's a dark black man and he's the calmest one in the entire movie. No matter what's happening to him, how invasive people are being towards him, he's cool. But right then he fucking snapped, and he's like, Rose, where are the keys? Get me the fuck out of here.
Right.
Yeah, she's like crying, I can't find the keys.
And then she's like, oh, they're right here. And then like her just 180, they're right here.
Yeah, she's a disgusting piece of shit. Surprise. So the kids are all fucking in on it. Jeremy was actually the one who kidnapped Andre in the first place. He was the one wearing the helmet. Rose uses her fucking body to seduce black men into coming to her house and going through this fucking bullshit. So they're just creeps.
Everything's starting to come together. So then Chris and Jeremy about to fight, and then the mom taps the teacup.
And he hits the floor.
So meanwhile, on Rod's side, he's trying to call him, can't reach him, goes to the cops. He's telling them what he thinks is going on. My friend's missing. He's at his white girlfriend's house. There's some weird shit going on. He got hypnotized, all this stuff. And they laugh at him. This sounds crazy. So he's like pissed off, whatever. Chris wakes up. He's in a different room, and he's strapped to a chair. And there's a TV in front of him. And then like on top of the TV, there's like a deer head mounted on the wall. And
it's a very creepy room. Like
super creepy.
It's like a Twilight Zone room. It has got this, and I don't know why they keep it like this. That makes it even creepier, because they have a lot of fucking money. They could upgrade this shit, but it's like a shitty little chair that he's strapped to, a squat little old-fashioned TV, and it's just a creepy room.
Yeah, so like the TV turns on, and it's a homemade video, and it's Rose's grandparents. Her grandpa is talking about life and family history and whatever, talking about immortality and
like it's a fucking infomercial for a retirement community.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And what it is this Red Alchemist Society. It's a group that come together to bid on black bodies to inhabit once they get too old in their white bodies. And they believe that they're destined for immortality and deity status, which, like, how fucking pretentious are you? And over hundreds of years, they work out to figure out the science of how to do that, and they think that they're going to achieve the power of the Holy Grail. Fuck y'all.
It's bananas. So he gets knocked out by the hypnosis again, and Rod just trying to call his phone. Rose answers. She answers the phone. At first, you don't see her; you just hear her talking, and it sounds like there's a lot of emotion. But when you actually see her talking,
she's dead faced, no makeup, her hair is pulled back. She looks like an ill kid who's been kept in a basement for years.
Right. So she's trying to make up an excuse of where Chris is.
He left so fast, and he left his phone behind. Like, what? No.
Right. And Rod knows that she's lying, so he's trying to
he even pauses the phone to yell at the phone and say,
"Oh, you're a crazy bitch." Yeah. And then
she does what she does best. And when he comes back after starting to record the conversation, she uses her feminine wiles. Don't pretend like you didn't call here because you're trying to get at me or whatever the fuck she said. And he's like, what? No, no.
He's like, F you, hangs up, whatever. And then he's like, shit, she's smart. She knows what she's doing. So then Chris wakes up again and he sees on the TV Jim Hudson. So Jim Hudson is the blind art dealer. And he's telling him, hey man, like, I'm just going to explain to you what's going on about the process. So he explains to them about the switching bodies thing. Jim is like, I don't care if you're black, to be honest. You people are weird. I just want your eyes. Like, you know,
Oh,
he can't see.
don't say that shit. Oh, I don't care what color you are. You're still stealing his body. And it's still a system of oppression aimed only at Black people. So you are a huge problem.
Exactly. So Chris completely understands what is happening and what is about to happen. Then the video of Missy, I think that's the mom's name, she's hitting the teacup.
Yeah, he sees the hypnosis part coming again.
So he goes out. You see that the dad, he's getting Jim ready for the surgery, right? So he like cuts open his head, takes his brain out.
Ugh.
Yeah, whatever. And Jeremy's gonna go get Chris and bring him to the room. So he unshackles Chris from the chair. And as he's getting the IV bag ready and stuff, Chris hits him over the head with like a
It's like a pool ball. It's a
Yeah, but
pool
like
ball.
big.
A Billy. Oh,
It was like bigger than that. And he hits him over the head, and then he hits him twice really hard.
he was able to avoid the second hypnosis because he was picking at the chair and he took the stuffing out and put it in his ears so he wouldn't hear the
Yep.
noise. Because he's
He just
a
pretended.
smart man.
So when the dad notices that Jeremy's taking a while, so he goes out to the hallway, and Chris just rushes at him with the deer head.
Which, how full circle is that? They
Yep.
killed a deer. He uses the deer to kill that guy. Love it.
He impales him, pulls it out. The dad's dying, and he knocks over a candle and lights the room on fire.
Okay, so while this is happening, they keep showing Rose because she's a weird ass bitch. And after he kills the dad, when they show her, she's literally eating Fruit Loops. She has Fruit Loops in a bowl and she has milk in a cup so that she can keep white and colors separate.
Yeah, that's extra.
Very. They're
Literally.
deeply racist, not just regular
Yeah.
racist.
And she's also on Google looking handsome black men or whatever the hell she typed.
Because she is a disease.
So Chris is going upstairs, he's getting ready to leave, and he sees the mom.
Okay, so he sees the mom. And when they show him on the screen, he's fucked up because he just had to fight for his life. And the way that he's looking at her, like he's super fed up with white people. He's like tired and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, you crazy bitch.
And she doesn't have her teacup. So they both go for it. And he knocks it down and she gets him with a knife in his hand. And he doesn't even flinch. Like it goes through his hand and he is just staring at her with this rage. He takes the knife out of his hand and then just stabs her and kills her. He's about to leave, but who shows up but Jeremy? Jeremy jumps on his back. He's like choking him out. And like you can see Chris is about to go. Like he's about to pass out, but he pushes through and he grabs the door, knowing that Jeremy is gonna kick it closed. And as soon as Jeremy goes to kick it, he stabs him in the leg and then stomps his face in.
Yeah, I feel like Jeremy's made up of cocaine and adrenaline. I don't understand how he got back up.
So he gets in the car, he's driving away. No problem, he's getting away. He hits Georgina.
Yeah, he runs that bitch over and he's such a good person at his core. He can't leave her like that because
Right.
she's black and he puts her ass in the car.
And also, he's having like a flashback of his mom because his mom died a hit and run. So he wanted to be better. He gets her, he puts her in the car, they're driving, and then she wakes up and freaks out.
She said, "You ruined my house," and starts clawing him to death like an angry cat.
They crash into a tree, and then Rose hears that. Then you see that Rose has a rifle, and she's shooting at him, and Chris is like barely dodging these. And then you see Walter run by, and she's like, "Get him, Grandpa."
Oh god, it's so strange. Like,
so then they're fighting on the ground, and Chris manages to take a picture of him with the flash on, so it like wakes him up. So Walter gets up and he's telling Rose like, "Give me the gun." And as soon as he gets the gun, he just shoots her
because he got the flash in his eyes. So whoever that person was before the grandpa jumped into his body came through in that moment.
But then he looks over at Chris and then he shoots himself because who knows how long he was like that for.
Well, yeah, and he didn't want the grandpa to come back because he was still in there.
So he's just messed up. Rose is still alive. She's bleeding out. She's trying to grab the gun. Chris is like, nah, and starts choking her.
So he's trying really hard to strangle her, and she starts smiling like a crazy bitch because she knows that at his core, he's a good person and he can't do it. And he can't.
I think she tells him, like, I love you or something like that.
Yes, she's trying to appeal to the quote unquote relationship they had, but like, suck on it.
So then cop car pulls up, so he stops, and Rose was just like, help, help,
Yeah, and he
playing
puts his
victim.
hands up because he's a black man in America, and it ends up not mattering because it's Rod.
They
He
get,
just
they,
gets up and sits in the car, and he doesn't say anything for a while, and he's like, "How did you find me?"
what he said? He said,
Like,
I'm
I'm
TS motherfucking
motherfucking A.
A. We get shit done.
He said, "You can consider this situation handled."
Yeah. They drive away. Rose eventually just bleeds out on the ground, and then
Okay, so what a journey. I want to start by saying that there was a different ending. The original ending was what everyone expected to happen in that moment, that it's a cop car and that cops come to arrest Chris because they're blaming him for the entire situation, and that Rod goes to visit Chris in jail and hints at him that he's going to get life in prison because of the way the system is stacked against him. Did you know that?
no.
Yeah, and I'm so
Oh
happy that
my
it changed
gosh.
because that's exactly what people don't want more of. What Black people don't want more of is that shit, that real shit, because in real life, that's exactly what would have happened. So I'm really glad that they decided to change the ending because, like, what a fucking triumph.
That would have
Justice
killed
was
me.
served. Honestly, I don't think I would have liked the movie as much as I do if that had been the original ending. So I'm going to layer in some facts about this movie. It was inspired by an Eddie Murphy sketch called Delirious, and there was like a question in that sketch that inspired it, and it was basically, why in haunted house situations do white people not just fucking leave? Like in Amityville Horror, the ghost literally told them to get out of the house. That's more than just a hint, and people just stay. So that's what inspired the movie. Chance the Rapper gave away free tickets to the Chicago opening, which is amazing because this movie, a lot like Black Panther, just inspired a lot of Black people because look, we're out here, we're doing it. We're doing big things, and it's really nice to see Black people celebrated. So I think that that was wonderful. And Chance the Rapper probably gave certain people who may not have been able to see it otherwise a really good opportunity to have that experience at the opening, like of all things. Like I'm getting a little shivery just thinking about it because it's so nice. The Sunken Place is a representation of the marginalization of Black people in America. It's literally people screaming loudly about their situation and the systemic racism and nothing happening because of it is real and valid and has been since Black people were forced to come to America, and it's 2021. Get Out is now being taught in universities, and which I think is a beautiful thing because it's so perfect. There are so many things to dive into in this movie. It's directed by a Black man. It's a real, just all of the symbolism for real things that Black people are still experiencing. I think it's really important because we were talking about how Black history is being whitewashed still now. And there are a lot of people, even some of my white friends, when I, talking about this podcast and what we're doing for Black History Month, and I was mentioning things about antebellum, and I literally had a friend look at me and say, I had no idea that was a thing. How can you be, how can you not know? But then that's how it's being whitewashed. So I think it's amazing that it's being taught in universities. There's a class at UCLA called Sunken Place, Racism, Survival, and Black Horror Aesthetic, which sign me the fuck up. So, okay. Also, something that anyone should do, if you watched it once, watch it again so that you can see all of the things that Rose does, like the shit with the fucking Fruit Loops. That's wild. If you didn't think about it the first time, you definitely will the second time. And then the biggest piece is when the cop stops them, or like stops and is talking to them and asks for Chris's ID. She is not sticking up for him. She does not want there to be a paper trail. She doesn't want cops to know that Chris was at her parents' house because he's going to disappear. So it is not, she is not a good person.
Obviously, we know it's not her first time, but she has perfected it. She's not going to make a mistake.
Right. She's very adamant, but it's because she's sinister. It's because she's a villain. Her whole family are villains. And it doesn't matter what way that they spin what they're doing. They're bad people and they're doing a bad thing. So then the last thing I'm going to say about this movie is that Jordan Peele, bless your precious heart and face, made Oscar history with this movie. Okay. In 2018, he won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for this movie, making him the first Black filmmaker to earn that honor.
He's amazing.
Praise be. Thank God for Jordan Peele. And I think that this is just the beginning. And this is the reason why I wanted to highlight these kinds of films during Black History Month, because we can do anything. We can do horror movies. We can be seen as more than just drug dealers and murderers and people in prison and things like that. And I think we're worth talking about. We're worth
Hmm.
being praised. So this has been a journey and one that I really hope people enjoy because we did. It was really good. But so you can follow the podcast on Twitter at GITM Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at WitchXPudding.
And you can follow me at Gabe.
Okay, bye.